I created this simple starting application, which you of course can find attached to this lecture. It has two buttons which allow me to increment and decrement a counter here, which is then output up here. And actually I do use two different components for this. The counter component, which holds the buttons, and each button basically just triggers a method call where I emit the updated event and either add one or subtract one. And then I have result where I simply output the counter. I do get the counter as a prop here. And right now, all the state is stored in app.view, where I do have counter as a property, and I update the counter here when I receive the updated event from the counter component. There's nothing wrong with that setup, and for such a simple app, you probably want to use that setup and not Vuex. But Vuex is easier to understand if we start applying it to a simple app before we then in the last module of this course will use it on a bigger application. So now let's work on this app and step by step introduce the different ideas of Vuex, starting with the central state. So the goal here is to get this counter out of this app.view file into a new file, let's say into a new module of our application, which holds this central state. Now typically you store all the Vuex related parts or files in a separate folder which you name store. It's on the same level as components, though I will say right away at the end of this module you'll find an article with A, further resources, and B, different setups. So how else you could structure your files if you wanted to do that. But this is a common setup, so let's use that. In this store folder, I'll create a new file, the store.js file. This is a simple JavaScript file which should hold my store. In order to be able to create such a store, we need some helpers from the Vuex package. So let's install it with npm install --save and then Vuex. This will pull down Vuex, which is an extra package, which gives us some additional tools to use here. Once it is finished, in the store.js file, we want to import Vue from Vue, and we also want to import Vuex from Vuex. So these are the two tools we'll need here. And then we can simply tell Vue to use Vuex to register this plugin basically, right? Like with the router where we also did this, now we enable this Vuex functionality in our Vue application. Vuex basically is a package which gives us some additional tools to use here for this state management and so on. So now that we enabled Vuex, we can create a new store by typing new Vuex store like this. Now store is a method where we pass an object where we configure that store. Now in that store, what do we need there? What do we want to have in this store? Well, as the main task is to have the state of the application, we want to have a property named state here. And this name is not arbitrary. It has to be named state for Vuex to detect it. That now is an object where we may store all the properties our application has, like for example the counter, and set it to 0 initially. That's the same value I do have here in the app.view file. So with that, the counter is now in our central store. Later on we will add more things to that store. For now that's all I want, though I of course want to use that store outside of this file too, so I need to export it, and I will export a constant named store where I save this new store in. Now with the store exported, I want to go to my main.js file and here register it in my root Vue instance so that I can really use it in my application. Because right now having it sitting in an extra file doesn't do anything. I won't be able to use it. Therefore, here I'll first import the store from my just created file in the store folder. So from the store.js file there, like this. And now with store imported, all I have to do is, like with the router, register it here as a property on my Vue instance. So I could say store is store, or since it's the same name, just the shortcut again, where ES6 will automatically, well, set up the right key value pairs here since they have the same name. So with that, the store is now added to my root Vue instance. And therefore I have access to the store. Now, how do I access it though? Well, it's very simple. Let's first go to the counter app where we have these buttons. Instead of emitting our event here, I can now access the store with $store. $sign again signals that this is not a property we created. Instead, it comes from Vue.js on its own, or in this case, from a third-party package. So the store gives us access to the central store. Well, and there we can access our state, and we know that we have a counter there, which I basically want to increment in this case and decrement in the second case. So let's quickly do that. With this, I'm changing the state in my store. In the result.vue file, I can get rid of my props. Instead, I'll add a computed property here, which I'll name counter to fit the name I output in my template. And this shall then return this store state counter. And whenever the counter there changes, this shall change too. Therefore, this template is updated. Now this allows me to now in my app.vue file remove both the part where I pass the props as well as listening to the event and remove the data down there. I didn't need that. And in store, I recognize this should have a capital S at the beginning. So Vuex store like this. With that, if we save this and go back to the application, you now see it still works as before, but it's improved. We now store the state in this central store and hence don't need to take the route over our app.vue file. Instead, we can directly communicate with it with this $store. Already is a lot better, but still has some issues as I will highlight in the next videos, so we can still improve this solution.